Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. For the next 12 minutes, I would like to talk to you about measurement at the classroom level. And I want to share a few insights with you and some measures that our Network for School Improvement grantees are finding useful for driving their work. So, let me start with two things. First is a quote by Tony Brake. You've heard his name a couple times already, the former president of the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. And on the right is a really good depiction about how I often felt as a high school ELA teacher when we looked at our standardized test scores. So in 2016, there was a survey by Harvard Center for Education Policy Research, and they found that 94% of middle school math teachers said they analyzed student test score data in the previous year. And 15% of them spent over 40 hours during that year of studying standardized test data. And we know in Title I schools that that kind of work happens on a weekly or monthly basis. But as Tony says in this quotation here, that data really isn't helpful for driving improvement work. Teachers need much more actionable data that allows them to make changes tomorrow based in their practice. They need different data than the data that they often get from standardized test scores. So Bob mentioned this morning that we fund a bunch of networks of schools. So we fund 24 intermediary organizations and districts to work with 38 networks of secondary schools. And they use continuous improvement processes to improve a set of outcomes for students. And though the specific measures that they use vary by the problems that they're trying to solve, so for example, those who are working on post-secondary enrollment are using like FAFSA completion. Some of our instructional networks are using student work. They do share some similar characteristics in the measures that they're using to drive improvement. I have them here on the slide. I want to quickly talk through each one of these and then share with you two measures that our networks are finding really valuable for their work. So the first thing is kind of a no-brainer, right? It's tied to their improvement goals. It's like focused on the thing that they're trying to improve. The second one is that they give adults in the system actionable data to help them make changes tomorrow to better meet students' needs. They don't ignore summative data. That's actually really important to make sure if these short-term things are leading to longer-term outcomes, but that's not the data that they study on a regular basis. So I want to give you an example. New Visions Public Schools is one of our networks for school improvement. What they're trying to do is increase the number of students, or increase students' performance on Regents exams. And their theory is by increasing the amount of reasoning and problem solving students do in their math classrooms, it will increase their Regents exam scores. So the first thing they need to say and figure out is, are students actually having more reasoning and problem solving? And if they are, does that lead to increases in mock Regents exams? Those two data points are much more proximate and outcome and actionable to the problem that they're trying to solve. So that's an example of 1 and 2. The third one is that they're looking at things that predict longer-term student outcomes. So up here on the slide is what our 9th grade on track grantees look at a regular basis, because this is a profile. Research tells us a student with this profile is more likely to graduate from high school and be on track for a post-secondary credential. The next to last thing is that it is tied to what research says is good practice. So we know, it came up earlier today, that students do better when they have strong relationships with adults. So a number of our networks actually track and measure the quality of students' relationships with adults. There are measures out there that allow you to do that. And then finally, the networks are finding that measures that elevate student voice are really important. They're both important for designing classrooms and schools where students feel welcome and engaged, and they're also like incredibly motivating for educators. And so what I want to do is show you two classroom measures. Both are student experience measures that are widely used among our NSI grantees. The first one is math specific, and the next one is content agnostic. So Oh, you cannot see that very well at all. So I will talk you through that measure. So this is a measure of whole class math discussions. So there is research going back 50 years or more on the importance of student-to-student math discussion for advancing conceptual understanding. These kinds of experiences increase student engagement and motivation, and they're really hard to orchestrate. It is hard to do a student-to-student math discussion where students are reasoning and problem solving. And I'm sure you can attest that teachers get lots and lots of PD about how to create these math discussions. They have coaching. Lots of observation tools are focused on that. And one of the challenges is the way that teachers typically get feedback on how they're doing on these discussions is somebody has to go into their classroom and observe that and then give them feedback. Well, this is a very short survey. As you can see, it's only 7 questions that measure students' perception of the aspects of math discussions that matter for learning and development of strong student identities in math. The survey takes about 3 to 5 minutes to administer. And I want to show you a couple things on it. So the first couple questions ask about the cognitive demand of the task as implemented. Research tells us that when teachers teach cognitively demanding math tasks, they often lower the cognitive demand of that task. So this question asks students like, what was the goal of the discussion today? Was there one right answer, or did you have multiple solution paths? The third question gets at whether students felt comfortable sharing their thinking in class. In other words, is there a classroom culture where students feel like their ideas are valued and that they can share exploratory thinking? Question 4 and 5 get at students' opportunities to make sense of other people's idea. So what's really, I gotta speed it up. So what's really powerful about this survey is that it provides additional perspective on the lesson. Teachers have their own perspective, they get coaches' perspective, they get leaders' perspective. This is the student's perspective on the lesson. It also orients teachers to the things that really matter in a math classroom and a math discussion. And it's not easily observable. So if you go into the classroom, it's hard to see whether kids are actually learning from other people's ideas. And the data is highly relevant to math teachers. They can make changes quickly, and then they can see it in the data. I'm going to show you then another one, which, and it also has a pretty nice visual of like people get the data back. So here's another one. Bob mentioned it this morning. This is the PERTS Elevate student survey. This, so let me start with the research. Decades of research has documented the impact of certain learning conditions on student engagement and learning. So this measures the extent to which students are experiencing the type of learning conditions that matter for engagement and learning. And it comes with a set of evidence-based recommendations. So if a teacher is low in an area, they have some recommendations for what they can do to improve. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes. Teachers typically give it 3 or 4 times a year. PERTS has done some research on this survey. So students are twice as likely to earn a B or better in math classroom when they rate their learning conditions more positively. The converse is also true. Learning conditions go down, so do they correlate with grades. So as you can see, teachers can look at the trends over time. It collects it, it gives it back, and as I said, it gives recommendation. I have never in my 30 years in this business seen teachers so motivated when they get this data back. Teachers want, first of all, we all know who's been in the classroom. It's easier to teach when your kids are happy in your classroom, right? So that's one piece of it. But it's also, teachers want to create supportive learning environments. So that's one of the things I like about it. The other thing is it's really actionable data. You do something and then something changes. Okay, so let me just end with this. Measures are not a silver bullet. It is really hard to get these things to work in a classroom and in a system. So I want to just give you a couple things to say. Is the data really needs to be easy to collect, turned around quickly, visualized in a way to make it easy to understand. We have found if that data is not visualized quickly and easily, nobody's using it, right? No matter how good it is. The second one is data conversations should be conversations about action. What can we do next? What's working? What isn't working? As I mentioned before, those two measures I showed you are student perception data, and that data is really important. How students feel about their experiences really matters for learning, but it's not data about student understanding. We have yet to be able to find a really quick measure of student understanding, so our instructional networks are still very much looking at student work, but they triangulate it to say, okay, the student work says this, are they having strong experiences in their classroom? And they can bring that data together. And then I cannot stress this one enough. Teachers really need wraparound support and coaching to take this data into action. That coaching can come from coaches or peers or leaders, whomever, but they need support for knowing what to do with the data, and also sometimes emotional support. When that data comes back and it doesn't show really positive things, people need somebody to talk to cry with sometimes. And then finally, looking at data, as I mentioned, is really scary. So they need a culture of trust and permission to fail. And now I'm actually good on time. I think I'm going to end with two resources to give you. So one of them is, Bob mentioned this, we supported West Ed to curate a set of actionable measures in math classrooms. So if you look at the slides online, you can click on the link. It'll take you to that repository. And then there was also this great toolkit that just came out about how to develop these kinds of measures or how to find them in your system. And that's the end. Thank you.